Okay, we are recording. So Ben, it's your turn.
Okay.
And who would you like to reflect you?
Anne, will you listen to me?
Unmute myself. I'll do my best.
Sure, that's all any of us can do. Thank you. So I like the fact that we got to number 5 because pretty much everything that Lou said is what I might have wanted to say myself. So yeah.
Is it my turn already? So what you're saying is that you've had similar doubts, perhaps, about being engaged.
Actually, Anne, so just reflect what he just said.
Okay, just reflect that. Okay. Yeah. What I heard you say was huge, and that was that you pretty much agreed with a lot of the concerns that Lou raised.
Yeah. So how I'm feeling now is like quite excited because in social activism that I've done in the past, I've often felt like somebody's banging on my door really loudly. I do need to see if there's an emergency. Can you just hold on a minute?
So you're pausing. I thought he was describing what happened in the past. Thought, oh, this is going to be an interesting story. All right, so I'm going to pause the recording. And go ahead.
Yeah, so I think the thought that I was just saying then, Anne, was that I was feeling excited by hearing what Lou had to say because I've often felt a bit isolated and on the edge when there isn't a big commitment to reflecting and learning.
And what I'm hearing you say, I suppose the inverse is that reflecting and learning are very important to you. And so it's exciting for you to be part of this opportunity to talk with other people about the value of reflecting and learning, hoping that it's going to help you figure out how to be engaged without feeling compromised, perhaps?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So something that I'm feeling at the moment is that I have been involved in pushing quite hard in a group, something that I feel very strongly that we should be doing in the group. And I took a bit of time out to do some reflecting with a really good friend of mine. And I've just yesterday come to an understanding that even though I might be right, I might be wrong, and they might be right. And so that feels, I feel better, that feels like a better position to be in.
Okay, what I'm hearing is that that after taking the opportunity to do your own personal reflection with someone that you felt confident to have that conversation with, that that you now have come around to let's say a psychic position, an emotional and a mental position that that you can live with the group proceeding as the group intends to proceed, because you might be right, you might be wrong, but you don't know everything. So
Yeah, exactly. And that's really quite an uncomfortable place for me to be in. You know, because I'm pretty sure of being right quite a lot of the time. You know, okay, and that's my time, so yeah.
And I don't think I need to really sum that one up. I think you did an excellent job with it.
Yeah, actually, Anne, if you would reflect that back.
Reflect that back? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm brand new to this. So
Yeah.
what you're saying is that it's an uncomfortable feeling for you to be in a situation. What I hear you saying is that it's an uncomfortable position for you to be in, to accept that the group is going to carry on doing what it's doing. And you might indeed actually be right, because you're used to being right, feeling that you're right most of the time. So there's a tension for you in that, but that's how you've decided to proceed.
Yeah. Thank you for listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So was that it, Ben?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So Anne, it's your turn.
Oh my. I have to choose someone. I guess I'd like to choose Ruth, actually, because we're both moms. And for me, teaching, I've been an itinerant teacher a lot, particularly in the area of Indigenous, helping non-Indigenous teachers figure out how to teach Indigenous content in their classrooms when they weren't educated for it. So I've spent a lot of time on the topic of learning and unlearning, and unlearning involves a lot of reflecting, a lot of personal reflecting. It involves a lot of study and a lot of discussion, but it also involves a lot of personal reflection about why did I believe the things that I believed, and how do I shake those things enough in my mind and in my consciousness that I can actually teach what would probably be a more accurate, in this case, a more accurate version of history.
So maybe pause there.
Okay. Actually, Anne broke up on the last bit. I didn't hear very well. That's something about history. I didn't hear that bit, but I know she said history. Really, Anne was saying that she's a teacher and she's been thinking about learning and unlearning for a long time with Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, and thinking about why we believe what we believe, and that you need a lot of reflection and study and personal reflection. You need to think about why you believe what you believe and how you can shape things to, I think you said shape rather than shake. Is that right? Shape things. Yeah. For what you are now going to think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ruth. To me, the word unlearning is a really significant word. And so it's something that I'm quite a disciple of Paulo Freire's and the pedagogy of the oppressed. And he spends a lot of time on talking about how we need to shake or shape, shake and shape the old stuff out and shape our understandings around the new stuff. So I just find the whole topic really exciting of reflecting and learning. And I also find it really exciting to be part of this opportunity where people are committed to doing it on this topic, which is such a core interest of mine.
Okay. So you think that unlearning is really a significant word. You talked about, mentioned a book, Pedagogy, can you say that? Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which is talking about shaking and shaping how we think. You actually said you think it's exciting to be part of this group here, to think about unlearning and an opportunity to think about it together.
Yes, that's fair. I am also really interested in the comments that have been made earlier by the other two people that have spoken about their concerns about participating in organizations where there were set demands and there were it seemed that the process was too I'm using my own thoughts here, but what I heard was that it seemed that the process was not flexible, or it was too rigid, and it didn't allow for reflection and incorporation of new ideas, and the word too militant that was used, and other concepts like that were used by a couple of earlier speakers. And I've often been in groups where I saw that happening to people, and I really didn't know how to work around it, despite being a really experienced organizer. So I'm very interested in this model. Okay, thank you. So you were saying you've worked with groups in the past where there have been set demands, but the process has probably been too rigid, too inflexible. You mentioned militancy as well, just not reflective. And although you were experienced in organising and so on, you've been puzzled as to what you can actually do about it. So you're glad to be part of this group. I suppose you're, well, because you're hoping to find things out. That's right. I think I'm done for now. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruth. Thank you.
Your turn, Ruth.
Okay. I'm not quite sure how this goes. Do I have to choose somebody who hasn't done anything yet? Because that would need to be James, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you don't have to. Doing that would give him a turn to speak, next.
Yeah.
And you don't have to choose him, but it's up to you.
Okay, James, are you happy to do that for me?
I'm listening happily, yes.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Right, okay. I'm actually going to talk about XR itself, where I live in Frodsham, Cheshire in the United Kingdom. There's a group of XR started up sometime last autumn in Chester, which is like the county town. It's, it's an important town, but it's not that huge. But it's quite different being part of an XR group in a small town rather than the major sort of events that have happened on the streets of London. So this Chester group is trying to work out, well, what do we do to be useful in Chester?
Yeah, so I hear that you're in a small town in Cheshire, UK, and you're working with an XR group that is reflecting on this question of what can they do that would be useful and relevant for this local area.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And they had just last Thursday, 2 days ago, they had a strategy meeting on Zoom, which unfortunately I couldn't go to because I was already committed to another thing on Zoom happening on Thursday evening. But it was quite interesting actually, because I thought, well, I do want to put some input into future strategy and what this group does. So it made me sit down and write what in the end turned out to be what they called a paper in advance with my thoughts about what we could do in relation to the three main demands of XR. Do you want to go?
Sure. So you had so there was a strategizing meeting on Thursday that you weren't able to attend, but that prompted you to then write a paper answering the question of writing about the three demands, what you might
Yeah.
be able to do to address them.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, good. And I was actually, it was an interesting exercise because there were various things that I'd read from XR, but various things that on the radio here, Radio 4, and one or two other sources, I think, that I mentioned, and came to the conclusion for myself that probably the actual town is called Chester, and it's in the county of Cheshire, but that's fine. That in Chester, we're very lucky because last May, our council declared a climate emergency, and a few weeks later got up a council task force to look at the climate emergency and what the council should be doing to lead Cheshire. So it seemed to me that the first thing had happened. The council were telling the truth. They were telling people there is a climate emergency. And then the second thing was action. And it seemed to me they're willing to act. The main danger is, well, will they actually do it, or will they sit around talking? So I could see there might be a job for us there. And the third thing was a citizens' assembly. Actually, go for those, James. I'll let you go for those two first.
Yeah, so I hear that there's, so you're in Chester, in Cheshire, and the council there put out some kind of statement that the climate emergency is real and needs to be addressed. And so the way that you're answering the three demands, so I may have missed the first one, but there was the idea of acting and creating a citizens' assembly, and you had some concerns that there would be some action beyond, well, you want there to be action more than just talking.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, they've done the first one. They've told the truth. They've told people there is an emergency. Yeah, that's right. We hope they're going to act, and well, the strategy meeting has sent a report which said, yes, that they will try and make sure that the council does act, that will be one of our jobs. But there's no need for us to demonstrate on the streets, at least at the moment, because there's no point. The council are in with us, which is great.
Yeah, so there's some integration between the council and the activists, which is a positive step that you see happening.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, I think that's all I need to say. Thank you. Thank you, James.
You're welcome. Ben, would you listen to me, please?
Sure. I was just unmuting myself.
Thanks. I was just going to start. It's 4 minutes. I'm going to start my own timer. I like. And all right. So, yeah. So this idea of self-reflection is dear to me, important, essential. I find myself resonating with a lot that's being said here. I particularly, what I heard at the beginning, Lou talking about being in political situations or movements where the leaders are not self-reflective, and that creates rot in the system and a big problem going forward. So to the extent that we as a movement can engage in that process, this process of reflection, self-reflection, and reflection on the reality of what's happening, will bring us closer to reality and bring us closer to our goals. And I don't see that as a black or white activity. It's an ongoing activity. So
maybe pause there, James.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Ben, just the gist, you don't have to get every bit.
I hear you resonating with this idea of reflection, and that you somehow chimed with what Lou was saying about it, and seeing organizations that don't do it go off track, and it not being so useful that they don't achieve what they're trying to achieve. I think you said they become rotten.
Yes, and I'm really making an attempt in the work that I'm doing to, rather than blaming outside, making sure that it's just simply a core tenet and practice of whatever I'm working on, so that I can at least hold myself responsible for how I'm engaging in a space, and if it is in alignment with my values, if it's in alignment with my goals, and if it's in alignment with agreements that I have set up with myself about why I'm there, what I'm doing. And I think I have found that by doing that and reviewing that, I can at least keep myself responsible, even if I'm working within a larger system that may not be doing that to the extent that I want it to.
Okay, so I hear you saying that you've chosen, rather than just to criticize externally if this doesn't happen, that you've made a choice to do the self-reflection within yourself, and also, I think, within organizations that you work with. And I heard you saying something about checking in with like a pact or arrangement you've made with yourself to make sure that you are following the path, but something along those lines. But I might have missed something.
To make sure that what I'm doing is in alignment with my values, my goals, and the agreements I've made with myself.
Okay, so it's to check in and make sure that your actions are in alignment with the agreements you've already made with yourself.
Yes, so that I know where I'm at, even if others may be not doing that. At least I can be responsible for what I'm doing. So I see that's 4 minutes. Thank you for listening, Ben.
Shall I just finish? So so I hear you saying that you're taking responsibility for doing this and checking in with yourself, irrespective of whether other people are or not doing it.
as best I can, not perfectly, yeah.
Okay.
Your turn, Ben.
Okay. Ruth, will you listen to me?
You're muted, Ruth.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm just thinking, it's what I'm feeling now is like slightly overwhelmed, because like there's 6 of us here having conversation, only one of whom I've had a conversation with before, and it feels like somebody chose 5 people who kind of are on the same wavelength as me, and I don't often experience that.
Okay, so if I just say you're feeling overwhelmed to some extent, but because you found in this group of virtual strangers, apart from one of us, that you found this group, we all seem to be on the same wavelength as you.
Yeah, exactly. So there's kind of overwhelmed, but also it's like something's freeing up here, you know. It's like I'm feeling like I can think a little straighter, and like I really love what James said about sparked off for me as like a remembrance to make a pact with myself to reflect and learn and keep my promises with myself.
Okay, thank you. So you said it's because you've discovered we're all thinking down the same lines. It's freeing you, and helping you to be strengthened in your thoughts and so on. And what James said has helped you to remember that you should make a pact with yourself to reflect and to keep on learning and reflecting as you're working, as you're doing things.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't quite say it, but hearing your reflection, what I really was trying to say was to, you know, I've made some agreements with myself, and taking time to reflect should enable me to, you know, it sparked off what James was saying, sparked off to remember to check in with myself and that I'm not deviating too far from the agreements I've made with myself.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, listening to James has reminded you that because you've already made agreements with yourself in the past, but what James said reminded you that you need to reflect on those and check in with yourself to see how things are going.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I really feel heard, Ruth. Thank you.
Right. I have to go somewhere now, don't I? John, would you be willing to listen to me?
Oh, yes, please. Thank you very much, Ruth.
Okay, thank you. I'm carrying on from where I left off, really, thinking about XR in Chester, because I realized I didn't have time to say why this evening session is exciting for me, in a sense, because I realized what the XR group in Chester was doing was reflecting on the three asks of XR and how it relates to us in Chester. So the Chester group is a reflective group.
Okay, so in coming into this session on we value reflection and learning, it's bringing clarity to the experience of working in your local XR chapter, where you've been reflecting on the application of the demands in your, I guess, local government.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yes, and just this is the lovely thing about talking, isn't it? It makes you think. I've realized that I told you what I did before that Zoom meeting in Chester because I couldn't go. I wrote down my thoughts beforehand, and that's not something I've normally done at all for Chester. But of course, normally we've met in person. We haven't met on Zoom, and you know. But anyway, but the mere fact of having to write something down actually made me learn quite a lot. And I've just remembered, Ben has reminded me that I sometimes run parenting groups and as a facilitator. And one of the things we've been trained to do as facilitators is to reflect afterwards. And I write a log after my sessions because if I don't, I might learn something, but it disappears from my head. But if I make the effort to write it down, I remember what I've learned.
So in the experience with the Chester meeting that you decided to write your thoughts since you couldn't be there, you observed that in doing the writing, you, I think, gathered information and learned more than you might have in a conversation. And then also that's sort of parallels another experience with facilitating, in which learnings that come out of talking are solidified by making the effort to commit them to writing.
Yeah, that's right. And also, perhaps perhaps I said it wrong, perhaps you report it back slightly wrong, but actually how exciting it is to talk to people like we're doing tonight, because it's in talking with other people you spark one another off and remember things and learn new things together.
And you know, the exciting thing about talking is it sparks you to take in new things, and also you get to learn together.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you very much, John. That will do for me. Thank you, Lou.
Well, thanks very much, Ruth. Yeah, I guess I would ask James, would you care to reflect for me?
Happily.
Oh, thank you. When I think about the principle of reflecting and learning, I'm feeling a challenge in organizing with Extinction Rebellion Seattle to find good ways for the group to do reflection and learning, to take in or generate knowledge based on the experience we create in taking action.
Yes, you'd like to find a way to have the Seattle chapter reflect so that it can generate new knowledge based on the projects and experiences you're having.
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, you know, yeah, I'm challenged because yeah, I've tried to bring some techniques that I know to the group to do retrospective or reflective discussion about you know, the work and the outcome, and I feel frustrated and confused that people don't seem to get it. If you could just reflect.
Yeah. So you're finding it challenging, something about the way the exercises or ways you're bringing to the group, inviting the group to reflect, they're just not getting it. They're not getting the meaning or value of what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think the particular challenge is people wanting to avoid a criticism or wanting to keep don't know how quite to put it, that they want to keep on everybody else's good side. Maybe they don't want to cause or be the cause of friction, I guess.
So in the reflecting, people are hesitant to criticize or say things which may be seen as criticism. They want to keep the friction down and maintain their relationships, and it's obstructing the honest reflection.
Yeah, I think that's a good reflection. I feel heard. Thank you, James.
You're welcome. Anne, would you listen to me, please?
Yep. Now.
Yeah. So what John is bringing has a lot of resonance to me. I have a lot of frustration in what I would call bringing, wanting to reflect on and give constructive feedback, and it getting interpreted as an attack or getting interpreted as introducing chaos into a system where the system is already maybe at its limits. And so the question for me is, in what ways can I invite reflection in a group process that does not trigger a kind of defensive response?
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you're experiencing quite a bit of frustration with finding a way to introduce the practice of reflection as an important step in learning and setting goals, or in learning. But the practice of reflection, because it seems like when you push for that, there's a fear in the group that it's going to create chaos, or that the group is already stressed, yeah. or that somehow this could be an attack.
It doesn't just seem that way. There's absolutely a defensive response if the feedback comes in too directly or too harshly. So the way that I've attempted, the way I modulate that is trying to make myself the standard of reflection, where I'm not asking other people to take more feedback than I'm willing to take. And in fact, I invite the feedback first. I invite the criticism or the feedback and see to what extent can I sit in the hot seat and be told, what I'm doing is X, Y, Z, and then and not hear it as an attack, but hear it in a way that is constructive and that I can learn from.
So what I'm hearing is that you are trying to mentor the process of reflection by using yourself as a case study.
Model, not mentor, but model it.
Model it. Okay.
Model being open to feedback.
Model the process of reflection by inviting by first of all putting your own reflections forward on what you've done, and also inviting other people to reflect with you.
Yes.
and make comments.
And it is by no means an easy thing to do. Intellectually, I can value it, but when that feedback comes, it often does come in a form which is emotionally stimulating for me, and I really do need to take it away and process it before I can come back and say, yeah, no, this has been valuable for these reasons to me, and I've gained this knowledge from what you've told me.
Okay, so again, what I'm hearing is that this is a really strenuous thing for you to do, and actually, to me, it sounds very courageous. You're not 100%. I'm also hearing that you're not 100% sure that it's working as well as it could be.
No, it's working very well. It's working
okay.
well. But it does take some time, and sometimes I have to go away and just take the time necessary to process it and integrate it and learn from it before I can then go back and articulate the learning.
Okay, I heard you say that before. I just wonder, are you given the space
So
to do that?
don't ask a question. Just
Okay.
reflect back what you're hearing him say.
Okay, so I heard you say that before.
What did you hear me
That
say
you have
before?
you have to go away and think about it.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
process it and integrate it. Right.
And process
Is that right?
it. And,
Yeah.
okay.
Thank you, Anne.
Great.
I feel heard.
Thank you. I guess Lou, you're my guy.
I'd love to listen to you.
And let's see. The conversation about Chester is really interesting to me because I've been living in, I lived in a major urban center and organized there for more than 30 years, but the last 16 years I've been living in rural areas, and it's very different. We're having a very similar kind of experience here in Renfrew County, in the Ottawa Valley to the west of Ottawa, in that I've been working with a small group of youth in the largest, I think it's the largest community in the county. It's about 15,000 people, which recently did pass a motion saying there are climate issues that we need to tackle. Didn't use the word emergency, but and set up made an agreement to set up a committee to tackle them. So I'm very interested in what you're having to say there, Ruth. We don't have XR here, and it's the group that I'm working with, a small group of youth who have never done anything like this before, and they've deputized me as their grandma. So they ask me what to do, and then I usually tell them what I think might make sense to do, and then they usually sort of bounce off that and do something that it inspired them to do or made them think to do that isn't really. So it's very interesting.
Let me reflect back what I'm hearing. So you're resonating a lot with Ruth's story about her work in a small town, because you also are living in a small rural town now, and you're working with a group of young people and the town has said that there's stuff that needs to be done about climate change. They're not calling it an emergency, but at least they're recognizing it. And you're working with this group of young people who are trying to be guided to figure out what to do about it. They've made you their grandma, and you listen to them and you give them suggestions, and then they take that and decide what to do, and they're taking action with it. And so it sounds like you may be curious to hear, you did say that you were curious to hear more of what Ruth is doing, but you were just relating your own experiences too. Yeah, and the other piece here that really resonates for me in what people have been talking about is that I'm often in the leadership of a group. It's kind of a different situation
with the Climate Justice Pembroke. They're actually about 45 minutes away from me. I'm in a very small village, but I saw them in the newspaper. And when I moved into the area less than a year ago, I really wanted to be involved in climate action. So I chose to offer my help to them in whatever way they might find useful, so that I could kind of get the lay of the land. Our area is actually represented by the only MP who voted against signing the climate accords. In 2016 or something like that. So there's a lot of political backlash and issues. So I wanted to get the lay of the land. That's why I did. But I'm often in the leadership of groups because I've been doing this kind of stuff for so long. And I'm often puzzled by people who don't feel like they can really participate. And I know that it has to do with the way the group presents itself to them. So I'm really listening hard to the comments made by Ben and the other person, I can't remember his name right now. Is it James? Who was the other person who spoke the same way?
So
yeah.
Let me reflect back.
So I'm listening hard to that as well.
Okay. So I'm hearing you say that you are listening to the comments about leadership a lot, and you're thinking about them a lot because you are often in a leadership role, and you described how you're currently in a leadership role with the youth group and also the other group, and that it has been, and you've been doing activism for a long time and been in leadership positions a lot, and it's been curious to you, or you've wondered in the past about why people are hesitant to participate. And you did express a sense of thinking that how the group presents itself, the tenor of it, or something about how the group presents itself has an effect on that. And so you're listening carefully to the things people are saying about leadership. And yeah.
Thank you very much. That was excellent. Thank
Okay.
you. You must know what you're doing. You've done this before.
I just try to listen, that's all. Okay. Let's see. So I'll talk to, let's see, who do I want to talk to? I will talk to, I'll talk to Ben.
Okay.
So I'm really enjoying this conversation. It's very rich. And I'm making little notes about things I want to talk about, and there are a lot of them. So, see, the one that's most present at the moment is about how actually this process, the empathy circle process, is actually a very good structure for having people listen to one another and hear one another in terms of learning and feedback. And I do think that it's important to have some kind of structure for that learning and feedback, because if there isn't, like a designated time or a designated process, I think it's very easy for groups not to take the time or to not have a process. And so what comes out of what is supposed to be the time for learning and reflection often maybe isn't that useful, or or people have trouble hearing whatever needs to be said.
So I hear you enjoying the richness of this conversation, and then you, Owen, in fact, you've made some notes about things you wanted to talk about, because you have lots of things to talk about. And I think this was a reflection about leadership, but that the empathy circle as being a very good way of making sure that reflection and listening happens, and that it doesn't, because of its, I'm not sure if you said formality, but the structure of it means that those things don't get lost like they sometimes would otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, so providing structure, meaning both a time to do learning and reflection and then a process for doing it. That I think if an organization doesn't have both of those things, then it can get lost. The other thing I'm moved to say is about feedback, and I see this a lot, that people have difficulty offering feedback skillfully, and so what they would like to have heard doesn't get heard. It gets more of an argument starts, or a person has difficulty receiving it because of the way that it's offered. That's what I see a lot that happens with feedback. And usually the problem is that when people go to offer feedback, what they're offering is their truth about their judgments of the other person, rather than their truth about how they're affected by what's happened, or what their deep desires are, and what they wish for, what they hope for, what they want, and how that's different than what's happening. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay, so you reminded me just at the beginning that you were talking about the structure and the time being important in this type of reflection. And then you went on to talk about that feedback is often not given skillfully, and so it becomes an argument, and it can become what the person who's giving the feedback kind of thinks what the other person is doing. I missed exactly the point you were making. You seem to be making an important point about what went wrong in that process for you.
I think the essence of it is people wind up communicating in an effort to communicate the truth and be honest. They communicate the truth about their judgments of the other person, or how wrong something is, as opposed to the truth about what their desires are, what they hope for, what they want, what they wish so much for, and their perception of why that's not happening, like what they would like it to be different, what they would like to see happen.
Yeah. So you're making the distinction between making a distinction about that the feedback concentrating on what's wrong, as opposed to, you know, what's happening for the other person. And yeah, and again, I know that I've not quite fed that back very well. You said it much more eloquently than I can feed back.
That's okay. That's close enough. Thank you. I feel hurt.
James, will you listen to me?
Yes, listening.
It's almost like the five of you knew the script of what I wanted us to talk about. It's kind of crazy. But a lot of what people have been saying, like that point that Lou made that I was having trouble articulating back to him, really resonates with me, even though I was getting very stuck with it. Because I've just been through a phase of about 5 years of refusing to take on any leadership in climate justice stuff and other activism, because I had understood a truth that somebody told me a long time ago. Just because you're good at something doesn't necessarily mean you should be doing it. I'll just pause there for a moment. If you just want to reflect that bit back.
Sure. So you're kind of, I think it's a little crazy how much synchronicity there is between what people are talking and the conversation you wanted to have. Namely, Lou's reflection to you about struggling to articulate your own words, and you are connecting that to something you learned about this question or this idea that just because you can do something very well doesn't mean you should be doing that activity. And you have been in a struggle with yourself over taking a leadership position over the last 5 years in the climate justice movement.
Yeah, but exactly. And in actual fact, I made a commitment 4 or 5 years ago that I would refuse all siren voices for me to facilitate and take leadership. Recently, it became apparent to me that maybe I had done enough of that and there was some stuff that needed doing and I wanted to do. So I've been facilitating a group that is basically the people that organize a major green festival, green gathering, a gathering of the green tribes in this country. And I did a big facilitation on Saturday, and it was great. It was fine. And I forgot to get a group together, to arrange beforehand to do a debrief afterwards. So I kind of just ended up going, I've got nobody to talk to. I don't know if I was crap or if I was good or, you know. And I did it. Then over the next 2 days, I recruited some people to let me do that.
So, so for a while, you've been resisting any invitations, pulls for you to take on leadership. You took your break, then you decided it was a good time to go back into it, and you started facilitating for a group that gathers green tribes. You had a big event recently, and you overlooked getting a group to plan to do a debrief. You felt a little anxious after, and then you took steps to do your own processing.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the commitments I'd made with myself years ago, was to not allow other leaders to become isolated and not allow myself, when doing leadership, to become isolated. So if I see leaders like not getting good support, I will go, I'm going to support you. And it was a learning this last week for doing, okay, Ben, don't forget that. Don't forget it for other people and don't forget it for yourself.
So an agreement that you made with yourself some time ago was to make sure you had support as a leader and you supported other leaders so they were not isolated when they were, you know, doing their work.
Yeah, exactly. And that's my time. Thank you, James. I feel heard.
You're welcome.
I feel very well heard, actually.
Great. Lou, would you listen to me?
Yes.
I find what I heard from Ben just now very sweet, in the sense that I know, especially within activist communities, there can be a lot of animosity directed towards leaders. Specifically, I know Roger Halem is a target of a lot of animosity. And so I really join with Ben on wanting to support functional leadership, not mindless leadership, but functional leadership that allows us to accomplish our goals. And I think there are many ways we can do that. And I'm very interested in hearing more, possibly either from Ben or just thinking about myself, what I would want in a position of leadership to have a sense of being supported.
So I'm hearing you say that you resonated a lot with what Ben was saying about leadership and about how leaders need support, because you've seen that leaders can often be the target of a lot of criticism in social movements, and that you really want to support effective leadership or functional leadership, and you're thinking about that a lot. How to do that? What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, so the first idea that comes to mind is transparency, that I find myself better able to support a leader when I believe that there's a high degree of transparency. And when I, on the other hand, when I get the sense that there is a lot of resistance to transparency, I find myself generating animosity, whether it's internal or external, but that there's animosity that begins to build up. So it's just a thing that I'm asking myself right now: what could we do? What could movements do to support leaders in being more transparent?
So I think I hear you say that you're saying that transparency is a really important attribute to you, that when a leader's transparent, you find yourself wanting to support them. And when the opposite of that is true, when you get a sense that a leader is not being transparent, there's animosity that builds up in you as a result of that. And so you're reflecting on what can communities do or followers do to support their leaders being transparent.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's coming up for me in a very specific way. I know I'm just thinking that in an activity, in a project that I'm working on, that I'm a leader on, there's a question about making my personal schedule available to the project group. And I've been asking myself, to what extent, how transparent do I really want to be, or what elements do I not want to be transparent on, and to what extent will that wall of not being transparent create the kind of resistance that I know I may have from the other side.
Yeah, so you're reflecting on a specific example from your own life where you are a leader in a group and they've asked you to share your personal calendar. And so you have to decide, or you're struggling with, do I want to do that? How much do I want to do that? And if I decide, and why should I do that? And if I decide not to share it, what are the consequences of that for the people who are part of the group? And so you're shifting your perspective kind of back and forth. How would I feel if someone did that, as a way to try to get perspective?
Actually, it's not that they asked me to, but it was an idea that I had that of just proactively creating transparency, and it's just a question. But yes, otherwise, yes. Thank you. I feel heard.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Anne.
Okay.
Thanks. So I'm just noticing the time. It's almost noon, and I think we probably go till about noon. So I'm gonna take a shorter turn so that because John hasn't gotten to speak much. So I'll go to Anne, and then. So let's see. Is there anything I want to say? I was talking about feedback in my last turn, and about the difference between, about different kinds of honesty. The honesty about my judgments of you, or the judgments of the situation, versus honesty about what I desire and what I hope for and what I'm feeling and what I want. I'll stop there.
What I'm hearing you do now is to sort of dissect the different kinds of honesty that that can come out in an organization when there's discussion about things. So there can be honesty about how people feel about each other, which you know, is separate or not necessarily the same as the honesty about the issues that are being discussed.
Actually, it's more, again, my honesty about my judgments of you versus my honesty about what's going on in me and what my desires
Okay.
and hopes are, what I want, what I would really like to see, or yeah.
Thank you for that clarification, because I didn't catch it the first time you said it before.
Sure.
Or this time. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing now is that one is your honesty or my honesty about how I feel about someone, a person's honesty about how they feel about someone, and the other is the honesty about what's going on inside them.
Yeah.
That person.
And the other thing I'll say about feedback is that my experience is that if I have a high degree of trust and connection in a relationship, then I can give any kind of feedback. I could tell my judgments or whatever, and the person can hear it because there's trust that I am caring about them and giving it. And when there isn't a connection or trust in a relationship, then almost anything I say can be taken as an insult if the person is so inclined. Like I could sneeze and they could take that as an insult. So trust, the level of trust in the relationship and connecting before providing feedback is also an important thing in my experience.
What I'm hearing you speak of now is how important it is to have trust, to build the trust and to have the trust before the reflection or critiques might happen.
Thank you. And I'm going to stop there.
Okay, so I'm going to ask John to help me out here.
Thank you, Anne.
I'm interested in the comments that were made earlier by you, Lou, about making sure that both the time and the structure are there for the reflection to happen. I'm interested in how one does that in a group of people, say, for example, these youth that I'm working with that have never been involved in organizing before, how I would actually present to them the importance of the reflection process.
Maybe
in order
maybe
to
pause there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in thinking about Lou's comments on the value of having a structure, time for reflection in organizing, you wonder how you could introduce a process or an opportunity for reflection in the work with the youth that in your community.
It's not just the youth, but it's people who haven't, working with church organizations. I'm gonna go build from what you just said. So thank you for that. But I'm gonna expand on it a little bit, John. It's working with church organizations or with other formations in the past, reflection's always been a part of what we did. I also have spent a lot of time working with people in organizations who've never worked in an organization before, doing grassroots mobilizing. And I don't really know how to encourage them to be involved in structural reflection. It seems to me that it might be something that you get to when you're further down the road. So I could stop with that one.
So that, in the past, working in church organizations, there has been a commitment to reflection as part of their organizing, but with the grassroots groups, you're not seeing that an obvious, or it's not apparent to you how reflection and learning would fit in, and your thought is that maybe the reflection and learning is something that would come into play at a more organized level of organizing, I guess. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And one final thought, then I'll, and that's that I'm very interested in thinking about the whole question of how one steers away from the critique of the person toward the community critique of the processes. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
So you're curious about how to avoid a situation where criticism is laid on an individual, if there's a way to criticize a process. I think that's what you said.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John.
Oh, thank you. I wonder, Ruth, could I ask you to reflect for me?
You're muted, Ruth.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, okay, John, go.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think, I mean, I've been pondering, what we can do in our meeting structure here to reflect and sort of build some skills on reflection. And I think having some structure or pattern is important. Can you reflect that for me?
Yeah, okay. Talking about the meeting structure here, I'm assuming you mean tonight, but and reflecting about how to reflect and how to build some skills. You think that we need some sort of structure or pattern to help us?
Okay, yeah, so I wasn't clear. Yeah, so I'm thinking about the meeting structure for Seattle's Extinction Rebellion.
Right.
group, and yeah, that yeah, sort of reflecting on my previous experience and what Anne just said about and others have said about the need for reflection to be focused on a desire or a opportunity perhaps for improvement, and not a criticism of someone's personality or motivation. Yeah, that's where I think having a pattern or a method of reflection would be important.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's clear. So there's a need in reflection to focus on the desire or the opportunity for improvement for what we can do in the future, and that feedback isn't to criticize people, and that's why it's important that there should be a pattern or a method to the reflection process.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I guess yeah, so that leaves me with an idea that I should look for other types of structures or methods for reflection than the ones that I've tried before, since I didn't get good results with.
Okay, I'm gonna intervene here because we're gonna get thrown back in the other room in 40 seconds. I just want to thank everyone for being part of this group and for listening to each other so wonderfully. I'm always so moved to watch people just, who don't know each other and just learning and maybe even new to the process. It's not easy to change communication habits and to listen carefully to each other. And I saw everyone doing that, and it always moves me to watch that happen. So thank you for being part of this. And I'm sorry, Ruth, that you didn't get to speak one more time. And I'm sorry, John, is it John? Yeah, that you didn't get that last reflection, but we're going to be back.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.